Not the. This is a countdown to Okay, good evening again to everyone. And in my own way, I'll welcome you to this event, though we have a much more official welcome that will be provided at an appropriate juncture. But today, I must say, I was asked earlier what occasion I had today. And my answer was that I have a date with a lecture to be delivered by Professor Irving. And it is. It really is something that I'm anticipating, as I'm sure all of us are, what we will hear today and the learning that we will get out of it, of course. But today is a very special day for us. I'm Christopher Malcolm, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm with the Faculty of Law here at the University of the West Indies. And we're here today, all of us gathered, to hear Professor Irving delivering her inaugural lecture, which is testament, really, to the significant body of work that she has done over many years, and which would have propelled her to the point of being elevated to the rank of professor in the University of the West Indies, and then subsequently now being able to deliver this inaugural lecture, and many others, I'm sure, that will be delivered over time. We're not stopping at one. So today, again, we have a program here where we will start, as we normally do, with a prayer. And this was a special indication that we could not, one, have a program without a prayer, and two, we could not have a program with a prayer without the Honorable Reverend Dr. Burchell Taylor being the person to deliver that prayer. So Dr. Taylor, please. Would you?
Let us pray. Lord God, God of goodness, God of grace, and God of mercy, we thank you for the blessings of life that we have received from you individually and collectively. As we have come here this afternoon, in this setting, on this occasion, we especially would like to thank you for the blessings you have bestowed upon your daughter, our sister, Professor Rachel Irving. We do thank you for her intellectual acumen. We thank you for her academic achievements, the contribution they have made to the academic community, as well as to the wider community of our fellow human beings. We thank you for those who in time have played significant roles in her life. Family, her teachers, her students, her colleagues. We thank you, O God, that she has walked the journey of life, trusting in you and manifesting the values, the qualities that make for a good human being. And so now, O God, as she makes this presentation to us on this occasion, we pray for your enabling, and we pray that the presentation will redound to the benefit of all of us who are here, others elsewhere to whom the presentation will be made available. May your grace, your mercy abide with us all and enable your daughter this afternoon. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for having lifted us up in prayer. And as we continue the program, again, let me at this point apologize for the slightly delayed start. I can assure you that Professor Irving was here on time. And, but there were a few technical glitches that caused us to be a little later than we would have intended. We intended to be on time. And I was telling some persons yesterday that for 7 years of my life, I lived by a bell. I went to bed with a bell, I woke up with a bell, I ate breakfast with a bell, lunch with a bell, and changed classes with a bell. I went to Monroe, and we lived by a bell. That's what happened. So today, we're all usually prepared to live by the bell, be it on time. But as we continue the program, we will now ask here, you will see on the program that we should have been receiving greetings from the Honorable Minister. We have an apology for absence from her, and we were expecting Mr. Alexander Shaw to be here in her stead. I haven't seen him yet, but in the interim, we will ask Professor Minerva Thame, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences here at the UA as well, to officially welcome us, formally welcome us, not just to the faculty here, but also to the University of the West Indies. Thank you, Professor.
Chair, Dr. Christopher Malcolm, Professor Paul Brown, Head of the Department of Basic Medical Sciences, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Birchall Taylor, the Lady of the Hour, Professor Rachel Irving, Professor of Biochemistry and Sports Science. Colleagues, good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Faculty of Medical Sciences to this inaugural professorial lecture to be delivered by our own Professor Rachel Irving. Professor Irving has made our faculty so proud and has once again contributed to another first in our faculty in becoming the first professor of biochemistry and sports science at the University of the West Indies. I have to also mention she also has a patent on a lactate muscle analyzer which can predict peak performance based on metabolic profile. These professorial lectures are very important events for the faculty and for the University of the West Indies, as we showcase the stellar work carried out by our colleagues. It is a means of promoting and celebrating the academic reputation of professorial staff for outstanding research, innovation, teaching, and professorial practices. It allows a public forum in which our colleagues can share with their peers, their friends, family, and the wider community. The process and the road to becoming a professor is a rigorous one, in which an applicant's research, teaching, and service is thoroughly evaluated by international peers who assess quality and impact of their contribution at the local, national, and international level. Professor Irving has achieved this. The medical faculty was the first faculty which began at the University of the West Indies in October 1948. We began with 23 men and 10 women who had their origins within the Caribbean. Over the years, we have grown from strength to strength, becoming no longer the Faculty of Medicine, but the Faculty of Medical Sciences, which houses now 7 programs and which are closely interwoven as we train healthcare professionals to take care of the people of the region and of our of our country. Over the years, we have watched a changing of the guards from professors who came to us from other countries to professors now that are predominantly from our region and from our own homegrown professors. We, the Faculty of Medical Sciences, are proud of our record of excellence, as we can report that we are the faculty on the Mona campus with the largest number of professors. This excellence continues this afternoon as we gather to listen to Professor Irving as she delivers and shares with us her work. I urge you to sit back and to enjoy the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tim, for the kind welcome that has been extended to us. At this time, we also have with us Professor Paul Brown, who is the head of the Department of Basic Medical Sciences, and we would like to invite you to deliver your remarks on this occasion.
Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Chris Malcolm, Honorable Reverend Dr. Burchell Taylor, Dean Professor Minerva Thame, fellow colleagues of Basic Medical Sciences and the UWI, welcome. To Professor Rachel Irving, her family, and I know that Christy is on her way, friends, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. I'm very pleased to stand here today to say a few words on this occasion. The journey of Professor Rachel Irving is a very interesting one, which she might be better placed to tell it. But for my part, it might be important to say that the making of a professor is not singular, but a convergence of paths that culminate at the destination. Professor Irving chose the most non-traditional path that you could consider. From technician to research fellow in 2008, to senior research fellow in 2011, and now full professor. Don't get it any more interesting than that. Although the primary focus of Professor Irving is research, an important part of the development of this post in biochemistry has included teaching, given that basic medical sciences is an academic department. Her research, and you will hear a lot more about that in a little while, spans investigation of atypical diabetes presentations, then called mosaic pancreas or type 3 diabetes, to metabolic response in performance and disease states, to genotyping of elite athletes. The more recent contribution to science included using lactate, and the dean spoke to the patent that was a novel indicator of metabolic dysfunction and the presence of certain genotypes in persons with diabetes, hypertension, and persons of African descent, and clearly within the Jamaican and US printing population. Professor Irving's contribution to course administration has included first examiner for several courses, including a WADA-approved cross-faculty course, Anti-Doping in Sports. And her book, Jamaica Gold, Jamaican Sprinters, was adopted in 2011 for use as a textbook for teaching sports science in Trinidad. Outside of course coordination, and I'm not actually giving the introduction because that is going to come, but we have to celebrate this from a department standpoint. So you know that we didn't give Professor Irving any props or shoe-in. She had to work for what it is. And so that is why we can actually celebrate the achievements at this time. So several service aspects as far as the department was concerned and to the wider UWI community in the area of her choosing. This is sports science. She's known internationally, regionally, as an expert and consultant in the area of sports science and anti-doping. And several of these have recognized her. In 2018, I was extremely pleased, because I was head of department at the time, to make the case for Professor Irving that she was a truly exceptional candidate and a colleague which was deserving of favorable consideration by the Committee for Promotion to Professorship. I am even more pleased this evening to see her advancement in the Academy and look forward to her lecture this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Brown. And you mentioned that Christy was on her way. She's actually here. So we welcome attorney at law, Christy Irving, who happens to be one of my past students as well. So I'm doubly proud to see her here. But as we continue, we wish to, at this point, you'll see that there's a musical selection that is there. But I'm going to use my chair's discretion to make a minor adjustment for flow. That's all I'm doing. I want, when we get to the meat of the matter, there's nothing to prevent it happening the way we want it to. So what we're going to do at this time, if you turn to the back of the program that you have, you will note that there are some greetings from overseas via Zoom. They are in fact recorded. So what I propose to do is to take all of them. I'll simply announce them, and we will have them being played as they appear on the list. And after that, we will then go back to the program with the musical selection and the other things to flow from that. So we have scheduled there. The first one is that we're going to get one from greetings coming from Tony Cunningham, and he's from Executive Masters Sport Organization Management, and he's a senior manager, Education Policy and Research, World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. That's the first of the ones that we're expecting to have. The second one is from Professor Carlos Aguilar Salinas, and he's the head at Instituto Nacional de Ciencias Médicas y Nutrición, Salvador Zubirán, Mexico, National Science Awardee for Mexico as well, we see there. And the next one is Professor Vincent Oniwera, and he's the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Innovation and Outreach at the KCA University, Kenya, and a member of the Consortium for Non-Communicable Diseases, Prevention and Control in Sub-Saharan Africa. And before we get them, we will note that even though it's only 3 that we have there, we see the breadth, we see the continental shifts, we see all the things that are indicative of the collaborations that Professor Irving has been involved in and the breadth of involvement that she has had across the globe. So we'll listen to those, after which we will then continue with the program as we have it on the front. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tony Cunningham, and I'm the head of social science research and policy at the education department here at the World Anti-Doping Agency. It's a pleasure to send greetings and to congratulate Professor Irving on her inaugural professorial lecture. I hope, and I'm sure it will be a fantastic evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but hopefully it won't be too long before I will be in Jamaica again. I first actually went to Jamaica just over 10 years ago now, and that's when I first met Professor Irving. I was invited to give a lecture at the University of the West Indies, the subject of which was to highlight changes to the World Anti-Doping Program and Code, which was agreed in South Africa the year before at the World Doping Conference. And the purpose of the lecture, or the focus of the lecture, was to highlight some of the changes to the athlete biological passport and how that was being strengthened. And also something that I remember in particular was about highlighting how coaches would be more accountable for their behavior around athletes in relation to doping behavior. It was seen at that time that athletes were the ones being held accountable for everything, even though it was clearly there was a lot of influence around them, particularly with younger athletes. So it was less than a year that I was with WADA when I was asked to go and give this lecture in Jamaica. And I was a little bit nervous, and this I don't think was helped by the fact that there was a lot of high-profile news about anti-doping in Jamaica at that time. I remember when I arrived, I think there was an article in the Jamaica Observer about my lecture, and I remember parts of my LinkedIn profile that were out of date at that time being included in the article. So I tried to forget about it a little bit, so I turned on some TV, and there was a local sports show on, and I think the sports minister was being interviewed and mentioned my lecture at the university as well. So again, that didn't help with my nerves in any way. I did give quite an anxious lecture to a large room full of people who were quite interested in this topic, but thankfully Professor Irving was very kind and gracious and made me feel better about the whole situation. And I think I remember the highlight for me was that I was able to highlight that my own country, Ireland, beat the West Indies in a cricket match that day. Something that doesn't, I'll admit, happen too often. So it did give me some pleasure or to highlight that. But again, it was helped me to forget a little bit about the lecture itself. Rachel also helped me to forget about this by bringing me to the National Relay Championships, which was a new experience for me. First of all, a whole stadium looking at athletics events just on relays. And I was astounded by the athleticism and the passion for athletics in the stadium. The highlight for me being the realization that a relay 4x100 meter team under 18 could run under 40 seconds, which was amazing to see. And from that point, we stayed in touch, myself and Rachel, as we decided to work together on a pilot project focusing on coaches, coach education, and athlete support personnel. The University of the West Indies participated in a pilot study of a university textbook and a course on anti-doping for people who are aspiring to be athlete support personnel. The research at that time was telling us that the coaches, the athlete support personnel, were really influential in how athletes behaved and their attitudes towards clean sport and the values that they had towards how they approach sport in general. So we saw this as a great opportunity to embed anti-doping education in the university level, where young coaches, young athlete support personnel, whether it be doctors, physios, lawyers, or scientists, were developing their identity about what kind of coach or what kind of professional they wanted to be. And thankfully, thanks to Rachel's leadership and drive, it was a great success. And the results of which were warmly received, I remember, at the World University Games in Korea in 2015. And the legacy of that program continued to live on, again, thanks in no small part to Professor Irving in keeping it going, in, I guess, recognizing her passion for education and her drive for clean sport and the values of sport. So it is, again, with great gratitude that I thank Professor Irving for her commitment to clean sport and to education in general, and to congratulate her again on, I'm sure, what will be a wonderful evening. And I thank you again for the opportunity to wish you all the best, and hoping that everyone has a great evening. Thank you.
My name is Carlos Aguilar Salinas, and I am the head of research at the National Institute of Medical Science and Nutrition in Mexico City. I met Dr. Rachel Irving about 10 years ago because of our shared interest in type 2 diabetes. This condition is highly prevalent in Jamaica and in Mexico, and we identified that this is an opportunity to do interethnic and gene environment studies. As a result of our collaboration, we published a paper in the official journal of the National Institutes of Science in Mexico, in which we propose a research model to use the large difference between our populations to generate new knowledge, especially for the early onset of the disease. I express my gratitude to Dr. Irving for this invitation, and I'm sure that we will have opportunities in the future for completing the proposed studies. Thank you so much.
I send you warm greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Professor Vincent Onywera. I'm a Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of Research, Innovation and Outreach at KCA University, and also a Professor of Exercise and Sport Science. I would like to send this message of congratulations to my friend and collaborator, Professor Rachel Irving, following her promotion to the full professorship. The work of Professor Rachel speaks for itself. She has done an amazing job as a mentor, as a researcher, as a global scholar, producing and successfully supervising postgraduate students at master's and PhD level, many of them for that matter, expanding her research territory to international standards, creating and establishing sustainable partnerships and collaborations. Her work in promoting the excellence of Jamaican runners of African descent speaks for itself. Her work in promoting the health and well-being of people, especially studying type 2 diabetes and its effects, speaks for itself. So I take this opportunity on my own behalf and on behalf of the many researchers from the African continent to congratulate Professor Rachel on her promotion to full professorship, and also to congratulate Mona University and all the people of Jamaica. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you as we thank them for their greetings from across the miles. We're coming up to Christmas, right? So we'll hear a little bit of that soon. But at this point, what we want to then do is to move now to the musical selection. You see on your program that it should be Vincent Ricketts. However, who we will have today is saxophonist Vincentio, who will entertain us. Thank you for that very special musical selection. And what we will be doing from here on is, at this point, we're winding down to showtime. So in a very short order, we will hear the main event. But before we get there, we have some, in fact, you would have noted that when Professor Carlos Aguias Salinas from Mexico spoke, he spoke to an article that was written, and one of the co-authors was Professor Rosemary Wright Pasco Williams. She was one of the co-authors of that. In fact, we have other co-authors in the audience as well. I think Professor Minerva Team, I think I saw your name there as well, did I? Who else did I see? Well, forgive me for that one, but I did see Professor Rosemary Pasco, Wright Pasco Williams there. So at this time, Professor Wright Pasco Williams is a consultant endocrinologist and former president of the Medical Association of Jamaica. She's also the former head of department of the Department of Medicine here at the Mona. And today she will be doing the very special honor of introducing Professor Irving prior to Professor Irving taking us on that very special journey that we're all here for today. So I invite you, Professor, to introduce her.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, and all protocols observed. Professor Rachel Rebecca Irving's journey is a tale of possibilities, not obstacles. The only daughter in a family with 4 children, she was brought up by her father. He had high expectations for her and for all the children in the family. Rachel's dream was to be a medical doctor. But come graduation from the Convent of Mercy Alpha Academy, financial constraints prevented enrollment in 6th form. Possibilities, not obstacles. Rachel got a job, and through part-time studies, she worked her way through the then CAST, College of Arts, Science and Technology, now the University of Technology, and she became a medical technologist. Possibilities, not obstacles. Driven by her desire to complete her education, she chose to work as a medical technologist at the University of the West Indies, Mona, as it gave her the opportunity to matriculate into the Bachelor of Science degree program. She was one of the pioneers, as at that time, she completed a degree in both computing and biochemistry. But her dreams of becoming a medical doctor was once again stymied. She was now married and she was now a mother. And we see the product of her marriage and her beautiful daughter. Possibilities, not obstacles. So she started a PhD program at the University of the West Indies, Mona, under the supervision of Dr. James Mills, he of blessed memory. The journey through scholarship took her to Brown University, a private Ivy League research university in Providence, Rhode Island, and the Rockefeller University, a graduate-only university in New York, a world-renowned center for research and graduate education in biomedical sciences, and actually the oldest biomedical research institution in the United States. There, she did research on linkage analysis of diabetes in Black Americans and Jamaicans through generations. And as she tells it, however, paternity fraud caused the study to be derailed. Paternity fraud amongst the study subjects, and she will elaborate on that. Possibilities, non-obstruction. She completed her studies, and she successfully defended her thesis, which was entitled Biochemical and Genetic Links Between Maturity Onset Diabetes of the Young and Gestational Diabetes. Again, possibilities, not obstruction. She declined the offer from Rockefeller University for her to spend another 2 years with them because she wanted to be like her father. He was a hands-on father. She wanted to be a hands-on mother for her daughter. And Christine Irving, her daughter, is now, if you've heard, a successful lawyer, who is working in Canada. A round of applause, please. Professor Irving actually regrets that her father was not there to see her success. The success of Usain Bolt and Asafa Powell, then the two fastest men in the world, and Jamaica's success at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing ignited an interest in the genetics of Jamaican athletes. Possibilities, not obstruction. She began research in the field of sports science and sports genetic, publishing one of the first articles, a scientific scholarly article in this area. She looked at mitochondrial DNA, the haplogroup in the elite Jamaican athletes. The research paper was entitled Importance of Mitochondrial Haplotypes and Maternal Linkage in Sprint Performance Among Individuals of West African Ancestry. She continues, as you've heard, to be a prolific researcher in this field, and she will elaborate on that as she does her presentation. She is a multifaceted woman. Possibilities, not obstruction. The COVID-19 pandemic gave her an opportunity to become a businesswoman as she believes in generational wealth. She tells me that she's a quiet woman, a shopper of high-end products, and a woman who values friendship. Dr. Mills was like a father to her. True story. He begged her on one of their trips to accompany him to a Victoria's Secret store. He wanted her to help him to choose a gift for his wife. She complied, and she succeeded in providing him with a lovely gift. A round of applause to her at this point in time. Her past PhD students are like her children, she says. Dr. Aldine Facey is now one of the youngest head of department at Mona. Dr. Ian Campbell is now one of the youngest policy advisor to the Ministry of Health and Wellness. But I have known Rachel since she was a PhD student. And as you've heard, we have actually co-authored several papers together. I found her to be a very focused, very determined, eminently assured woman. On one of our trips to Mexico, she reminded me recently that I got her to eat cornmeal from a coconut leaf. But I was not so successful in convincing her that I could read the notices and the road signs that were in Spanish as we traversed Mexico City's subway and bus system. The well-bred lady that she was and is, she gave me no indication that she thought I was talking nonsense, but it is what it is. As I said, a story of success, overcoming obstacles, and seizing the possibilities. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rachel Rebecca Irving, BSc, PhD, Professor of Biochemistry and Sports Science, as she gives her professorial inaugural lecture on Decode, How AI and Genetics Reveal the Legacy of the Transatlantic Slave Trade on Chronic Diseases and Athletic Performance. Please, a round of applause as she makes her way to the podium.
Thank you all. I am so overwhelmed with gratitude. My father, I wish he was here. My mother left when I was 3 months. She left us, and she never looked back. When I got the scholarship to Rockefeller, I wanted to stay, but I remember what happened. I came back for my daughter. And here I am. I am a professor. I did not make a mistake. Thank you. All protocol observed. Let's talk. Decode. Unveiling the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade in chronic diseases and athletic performance using AI and genetics. I am Rachel Irving. AI superimposed the past onto the present to mathematically predict outcomes. We don't need expensive clinical trials anymore. AI can level the playing field in these poor countries. We can have the health system of America, of UK, if we use AI properly. Don't be afraid of AI. Let's go. Yeah, it's not working for me. I need to get into this. Our story, the Jamaican story, began when our ancestors were taken from their home via the transatlantic slave trade. They were packed like sardines. They suffered. They didn't have enough oxygen. They could not breathe. They had to morph. They had to reorganize themselves. How did they survive? We don't know. It was survival of the fittest. The lung became more efficient. If they were around during the time of COVID, with that level of oxygen saturation, they would have died. Their heart became thicker. It became hypertrophic, with some genes adapting to make muscles more efficient. But because of that, we are predisposed to developing chronic diseases such as the hypertension, the diabetes, the kidney failure. So the blackness of the transatlantic slave trade morphed into something else. We see the sunlight, the yellow in our flag, and we achieve the goal. Those of us who become professors from nowhere, who never saw themselves as reaching that pinnacle, those of us who become very, very good sprinters and musicians, those of us who survive in spite of. So I want to talk to you about how we survive. Those slaves survived because the system was morphed. I hypothesize that the glycolytic pathway, the first step in cellular respiration, was severely impacted by hypoxia in the slave ship. Glycolysis occurs when no oxygen is there or oxygen is inefficient. So when oxygen is inefficient, it means that the system does not segue into oxidative phosphorylation that needs oxygen, but segue into lactate metabolism to make the system acidic. And if the system becomes acidic, it doesn't work. You need insulin from the pancreas for glycolysis. But if glycolysis is upregulated, it means that insulin is overproduced. And if insulin is overproduced, the pancreas becomes tired. And if the pancreas becomes tired, it means that there is dysregulation, and you'll get chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, pancreatic cancers, and kidney failure. One of the major manifestations of the suffering of slaves was diabetes. Diabetes because they had to use glycolysis, and glycolysis should not only give you the energy. You should get it from oxidative phosphorylation. So because glycolysis was upregulated, glycolysis became dysfunctional. And if it becomes dysfunctional, insulin is not used in the way it should, and there is excess sugar in the system. So excess sugar in the system gives you a condition we call diabetes. The World Health Organization defined diabetes as type 1 and type 2 originally. But in Jamaica, this European doctor saw a type of diabetes that was linked to slavery. The diabetes did not look like type 1, which is diabetes without insulin. It looked like a type of diabetes that was somewhere between type 1 and type 2, and the people did not use insulin for treatment when prescribed. They used bush, and they mix it with insulin, and they were living in cramped condition, and they diagnosed themselves. So when they pee on the ground, if ant came around the pee, they diagnosed themselves as having diabetes. So he thought it was a funny type of diabetes, so he called it the J type, the Jamaican type of diabetes, because he has never seen that diabetes anywhere else. In 1983, Professor Morrison saw a type of diabetes that was biphasic. It was linked to an unpredictable pancreas, meaning that sometime the person would be normal, another time they would be diabetic. He decided to publish what he saw in prestigious journal, but he was a West Indian man, and they didn't accept that there was a biphasic type of diabetes. In 1994, a young medical technologist with a BSc in computing and biochemistry was sent to the antenatal clinic to study diabetes in pregnancy. And diabetes in pregnancy was linked to older women, sick women, women with preeclampsia. But she saw a type of diabetes that was linked to young women, women who were slim, women who ate Kentucky and were surviving and didn't believe that they had diabetes. So what happened is that nobody accepted this, but we had some fascinating and some, persons who loved to investigate. So what we did, we backtraced the diabetes. So we did a family history, a pedigree, and we backtraced the generation to slavery. And what we found is that diabetes was inherited from generation to generation to generation. And it was inherited in a way not like Europe said. So you'll find that some persons in the family, based on the European standard, was not supposed to have diabetes. So they had diabetes. And Europe wondered what was going on with Jamaica. But they did not understand that our glycolytic pathway was messed up. and our diabetes was not what is usually seen in Europe. So based on that, a group of us presented the diabetes to different places. We presented in Canada. We compared the diabetes that we saw in Jamaica to that of diabetes in pregnancy in Canada. It never looked like that diabetes. We presented the diabetes to diabetes in Africa. The diabetes in Africa was sort of different. The diabetes in Africa was associated with Europe because Africa was at that time becoming more westernized. We compared the diabetes to diabetes in Europe, in Finland, and it sort of looked alike, but Jamaica never had an established genetic facility to check for mutation. So we just assumed that it was something like the diabetes in Europe. And I wrote my first book, Hormones, or Family History and Diabetes in Pregnancy. As I saw it, it was diabetes in the Black woman, diabetes inherited, diabetes passed down from generation to generation. And then in 1999, diabetes blew up because it was the start of the fast food industry. It was the start of people not exercising, so diabetes became complex with a lot of comorbidities, kidney failure, heart disease. The European, the American, the rich people wanted to know about diabetes more because many of their people were dying from diabetes. They wanted to study the blacks, but the blacks didn't trust them because what happened is that before some black soldiers and white soldiers had syphilis, and they treated the white soldiers and give the black soldiers water, placebo. They use them as control. And the white soldiers survived, and the black soldiers and the children, some of them died from complication of pregnancy, from blindness, from all different sort of related conditions. So I was recruited because I was a black woman, and they trust that I could talk to my people. And there were many persons from Jamaica that had family members in the US. So I was recruited by Rockefeller to look at diabetes. And we were involved because we had some fantastic inheritance pattern, diabetes from generation to generation to generation. So the father having the diabetes passing to the next generation, passing to the next generation. Right, so we go back to that. So diabetes here. Yeah, diabetes, the first generation is in Roman numeral, second generation in Roman numeral, third, fourth, etc. So diabetes passed from the first generation, mother with a circle, with a cross is dead, father, square, has glucose intolerance. It was said to pass from the first generation to the second generation to the third generation. But because of paternity fraud, what they found is sometimes our fathers weren't our fathers. And our grandfathers were our granduncle. So we thought that we had a system where we could check based on what we saw. It is supposed to be strong linkage, but it was not. So Rockefeller decided that they didn't want to work with us anymore. because it didn't make sense. And with that sort of thing, they could not publish. They could not publish in the U.S. journal. How would they, explain supporting a population with this level of paternity fraud? So what happened? We had to publish in journals that was not so rated. So we published in the International Journal of Diabetes in Developing Countries. And what we found is that our diabetes was different. So we saw a diabetes that the pancreas sometimes produces insulin, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it seems normal, sometimes there is pancreatitis, and we call this mosaic pancreas or type 3 diabetes. They didn't accept it then. They say there's nothing like that. 5 years down the line, they define a type 3C diabetes linked to pancreatitis. But because we are from the West Indies, we could not fight that we were the first one who defined this type of diabetes. We wanted to be sure that what we defined was really so we looked at other ethnic population. We went to Mexico. We compared diabetes in Mexico. What we found is that the diabetes in Mexico was sort of different. It was more linked to the diabetes seen in Europe. Our diabetes in Jamaica was not associated with any genetic mutation. But what we found is that the diabetes prevalence increase as we get fatter, as we exercise less. What we came up with in conclusion is that for any population, there are genetic and environmental risks. You have to know the genetics makeup of your population and control environmental triggers, because those environmental triggers will cause an increase in prevalence. So it is important we see an uptick in stroke in Jamaica. What we need to know is what is triggering that increase in strokes. What is triggering the increase in heart problem? What is triggering young person just dying? Have we studied our genetics? Do we understand our environmental risks? So Rockefeller decided that they would not work with us because of paternity fraud. And then another opportunity came. Our Olympians, our Jamaicans started to do very, very well at the Olympics. And everybody wanted to know about the DNA of Jamaican sprinters. So a group of rich people again decide that they wanted to study our DNA. So people from Glasgow, people from the U.S. Olympic Committee, people from Australia wanted to know why Jamaica ran so fast, or why are we excelling at the highest level. They wanted to look at a special gene, the actinin 3 gene. The actinin 3 gene is associated with rapid contraction of the muscles. They wanted to also look at a regulatory gene, the ACE gene, the angiotensin converting enzyme gene, a gene associated with regulation of the heart, the lung, everything. So they hypothesize that if the actinin 3 gene is working, then the polymorphism linked to chronic diseases should not be prevalent in the Jamaican population. But listen, they found that the actinin 3 polymorphism, the strong form of the gene associated with rapid contraction, is very prevalent in the population. 75% of Jamaicans have the RR, meaning they get a copy from the mother, a copy from the father, so they have a strong type. 23% get one copy, meaning you get a copy from your mother or one copy from your father. And 2% have the weak type, meaning there is no copy. However, that is so, but we also found that the ID polymorphism that is linked to adverse disease outcome is also very prevalent in our population. 50% of Jamaicans have that ID polymorphism. How do we know that this is linked to adverse outcome? Because they have done studies all over the world, and they have found that people with that polymorphism tend not to do very, very well. They tend to have the diabetes, the hypertension, heart disease. As a matter of fact, when they have heart disease and they are treated with stent, 50% of them relapse. 50% have restenosis. We have that polymorphism. We also have the strong gene associated with sprinting. So what does surviving the transatlantic passage tells us? The harsh condition of the slave ship led to adaptation in muscles and rapid energy regeneration. These morphisms now contribute to superior athletic performance, but there is a sting to the story. We are also at risk to develop the heart problem, the diabetes, the hypertension, if we are not careful. When we did this study, people were saying, hey, you can say that, but you have a high level of paternity fraud. So how are you sure that those persons are who they say they are? Your mother never lies. So what happened is that we look at certain markers in the mother's mitochondria, the inner cells of the mother. We look at haplogroup, and the haplogroup tell you exactly where you're from. As a matter of fact, they use it in cold cases. If a criminal is not in a database and they want to know the profile of the criminal, they look for haplogroup, and they'll know whether the person is Caucasian, whether the person is African, where the person is likely to be from. So what we found based on our genetic analysis, haplogroup analysis, we found that many of us, 85% of Jamaicans, are from West Central Africa. So what is our global genetic footprint? Mitochondrial haplogroup and biogeographic frequency chart based on population genetics tell us that we originate, most of us, from West and West Central Africa. The genetic lineage offers clue to both athletic performance and susceptibility to certain diseases. So we have the good genes, but we also have the bad genes. But there is some sweetness to the story. Based on our special adaptation, instead of looking like we are from Nigeria, there. Yes, instead of looking that like we are from Nigeria here, we look more like we are from Kenya. So Jamaicans look like they are from Kenya because of the special adaptation we did when our ancestors were in the bottom of the slave ship. So based on everything, we put together a book, Jamaican Gold, Jamaican Sprinters. We spoke about the haplogroup. We spoke about biomechanics. We spoke about evolution. We compare our system to the European system, and we had some very, very good story of resilience. Dr. Cynthia Thompson traveled in 1948 to London in a banana boat. She vomited, she had diarrhea, yet she set an Olympic record. The first Jamaican woman to have set an Olympic record. We not only wanted to just write in a book for the layperson, we wanted to document in a prestigious journal. So we had this article, Actinin 3 and the ACE genotype in elite Jamaican and US sprinters in the Journal of Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. And our conclusion is that even with the bad genotype, the ACE genotype, it does not stop us from running very, very well. Meaning, even if you are genetically predisposed to having a heart attack, if you exercise and you eat properly, you might not die from a heart attack. And London saw what we were doing and they wanted to know, the diaspora wanted to know about the legacy. So Jamaica Building Society, Jamaican National Building Society, funded us to publish a book especially for the UK market. It's called, or it was named Olympic DNA, Birth of the Fastest Humans, where we told about the compelling story about the genetics, and we illustrate how we have survived. We illustrate that in spite of what we have, we can overcome. It doesn't mean that because our health system is not funded. It doesn't mean because we don't have the equipment of a UK or the US that we can't have a proper health system. Because with AI, with research, we understand the limitation of our population. We understand what we are faced with, and we understand what we must use to move the population from where we are to where we should be. Based on what we presented in London, in Birmingham, we were invited to the historical Holy Trinity Anglican Church because they were saying that because they were born in Jamaica, there was this high incidence or prevalence of diabetes in the Windrush generation. they were saying they are no eating caviar and cod, and they should not be having that high incidence of diabetes. But we had to tell them, listen, you must understand your genetics so you can discuss with your doctor exactly the presentation, so the mode of treatment for diabetes might be different. So they might be treating type 1 or type 2 when we have an atypical type of diabetes. So it is important that generation communicate across the diaspora if we are to survive. And then we wanted to reach the Gen X generation because they didn't want to just listen to scientific and read papers. So we put together a documentary with BBC that spoke
At this
to
level of my sport, nearly all the athletes.
our study. And this is it.
But there's another connection. A hidden and more disturbing bond. Almost every one of us is descended from slaves. Is that a coincidence? I'm lifting the lid on a heartbreaking story.
Slaves had to lie in body fluids such as urine and fecal material, diarrheal fluid, and so on.
With inhumanity at its core.
There was no such crime as the rape of a slave woman.
I come face to face with my own slave ancestors. Nuh-uh. She looks sort of proud right there. It's a controversial connection that could be exploited by racists.
There is a worry that the cliche of the black man has more testosterone, is more aggressive.
But if it's true, it's a story of how some of the most brutalized people on earth rose to become its super athletes.
That make them want to be sprinters, and then how do they become?
The more docile ones were sold in those other countries. The more aggressive ones and the fiercest ones, if you will, ended up
%. So we see that the mortality on these slave ships were very high. So if you started a journey with, say, 100 slaves who had varying levels of testosterone, and you ended up with only 50 slaves at the end of the journey, I am saying that there is a higher proportion of those slaves who are more testosterone responsive than the slaves who originally started the journey. And what I did was to look at the actual conditions under which the slaves were transported.
It's shocking what he's describing. In these ships, men, women, and children were packed like animals. The living chained to the dead on voyages taking up to 6 months. Their human cargo was insured by the likes of Lloyd's of London. The survivors of these atrocities went on to build Jamaica.
Then when you look at things like muscular strength, these things would have contributed to the slaves being better able to survive the journey, being better able to survive slave beatings and so on. As you know,
Body in there rooting for them. It's incredible. You know, when I see Jesse Owens running,
I can appreciate him first and foremost as feasible on a genetic level. Hello, Dr. Irving, how are you? Good to meet you. I'm meeting geneticist, Dr. Rachel Irving. How are you? See what I'm made of. She's taking a DNA sample to try and find out which part of Africa I originally came from. I'll get the result later. Like Aitken, she believes the slave crossings have affected our genomes. But
that 3 years after, Michael went on to develop a stroke. So it means that if one is not careful, even if you are very, very good as an athlete, if you're not careful and manage yourself properly, because of your genetic profile, you can revert to a disease such as diabetes or stroke. However, he knew about his genetic profile, so what he did is he retrained himself and is now back to where he should be. So with all of that, from research to actualization, what can we do with the information we have? We don't have a technology park. We don't have a medical manufacturing site. So we had to borrow some research material from Silicon Valley. So we borrowed some sensor that we were able to put in the shoe of person and to get information about the system. And this is called biofeedback. And biofeedback can be used instead of big medical equipment. People who have stroke and need rehab, you don't need all of these expensive equipment. You can use just insole, not just insole, but in some cases, you can use insole to tell you how that person is progressing. We tested this on the Calabar athletes, and for 3 years we worked with them, and we were able to tell them, listen, I mean, you might be developing a hamstring injury. You might be developing a hamstring injury. And for 3 years, we were able to tell them, listen, you are not training properly. And those 3 years, because we were able to tell them exactly how to train, those 3 years were their most productive years. They won champs in those 3 years. We also use socks and heart monitors to sort of tell them exactly if they were sleeping well, if they were in balance. And the youngsters were excited because they used their cell phone and they pair it, and we pulled down the information from the cloud, and we were able to tell them, hey, exactly what you should do to reach a certain level. How would you get from 10.4 to a 10.2 second for the 100 meter? So it was very, very productive. And then in the 2012-15 period, people start looking at Jamaica to say, hey, you can't be so good, something is wrong. You must be gene doping. We said to WADA, hey, come to Jamaica, come and teach us. You are having the biological passport. You're having the biological passport. You're saying that we are doping. We don't even have money to have technology park. So For 5 years, they came to Jamaica and they had workshop with our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers, our coaches, and based on that, we understand what it is to use a biological passport. We also were able to get the first and only world anti-doping funded course in the Caribbean and Latin America here at UWI. This course is still going on after almost 10 years. It has earned the university about $500,000 US to date. What the youngsters do, there is some intervention. We teach them anti-doping, and then they go into the water system. They use AI, and they develop some anti-doping parameters, and water test them. If they pass, they get an international certificate. That certificate allows them to work anywhere in the world as an anti-doping chaperone. We keep borrowing from people. We have a well-developed lactate system based on our slave history. We had to use lactate to survive as the extra energy. So we can use lactate as a monitor. If an athlete lactate level is at a certain level, regardless if that athlete was an Olympian, if that lactate is not brought down, the muscles will be drunk, it will be intoxicated, and they will not move from where they are. So lactate can be used as a sensor. It can be used as a product. We can have brand Jamaica lactate sensor. We have the data to do that. We can also use lactate to monitor diabetes. We have HbA1c, glycated hemoglobin, as a glucose and as a monitor for diabetes. If we use our lactate, we can have something that compared to the HbA1c. We need to start produce our own testing and medical tools. We are in the time of climate change, and we were in the bottom of the slave ship. Our ancestors suffered. How can we use what we went through to best help our population or the descendants of slaves? We can use hydration pattern and dietary pattern, and we can use what we call swing thermometer. It is a thermometer that tells you about your internal temperature, your external temperature, the humidity of the place. I saw last year Shelley Fraser Price at Budapest. Just before the 100 meters, she was standing in front of an AC. It is embarrassing. It is embarrassing. We ought to do better than that. We are the spring capital of the world. All she needed was a swing thermometer. There is no way we should have taken our athlete when these guys have cooling vests, they have swing thermometer, and we who have, suffered based on our ancestors being involved in slavery, and we understand the whole running, the whole overheating of our system. Why have we not used what we have to market and to make our population better? I don't know. We have used also what we call sleep monitors. We borrowed those monitors from Clayton State University because we didn't have the money to buy them, and we used them on the student of JC. That year they won again Boys and Girls Championship. We use it to moderate fatigue. Because if you don't sleep properly, you can't perform properly. But what I want to tell you and what I want us to move with now is move from the biological to the digital. Harvard has encoded a video into the DNA of a living cell. DNA has the molecular equivalent of an airplane black box. It could help unlock the mystery of biology. DNA-based data carries 100 million times more information per gram than the modern disk drive. DNA storage will come into effect by 2030. Jamaica biomembrane this through our athletes' metabolism, through sensors, through DNA, could be marketed as an encoded video for training. If we were to market 300 million videos at $200 per video, Jamaica does not need tourism as the only provider of resources. FDA has licensed nearly 1,000 medical devices using AI. Believe me, AI was used to make some of those vaccines. We have the resources. We don't need a lot of money. We just need to put it together, teach our athletes, teach our youngsters how to make microchip from our training cartridge so that we can fund the services in our nation. You might not believe me. In 2017, we were invited to Japan. Dr. Malcolm was there, but we ended up in London because London wanted us as well. And they had taken MRI of some of our legendary athletes, MRI of the muscles, MRI and CAT scan. And they put it together and they were trying to tell us that, listen, we can use this to train the Japanese. They don't need to be so muscular. They don't need to have the actinin 3. That was the start of AI in performance. That was the start of AI. We predicted based on stress, health, and physical activity, we predicted what we could make of it. Our ambassador, former ambassador, came every day. We wrote a policy document. We were supposed to have marketed this document to Japan. It's nowhere. So we are behind, and AI is moving forward. So what am I saying to you? Jamaica currently is in trouble. 79% of mortality in Jamaica is related to chronic diseases such as diabetes and cancer. Jamaica has won 88 medals to date at the Olympics. When we look at the overview of our population, our young population, and we looked at university students, 4 years before some of them develop hypertension, 39% of them are pre-hypertensive. 4 years before, 45% are obese. It means early intervention can target and cause us to spend less on the health system. How do I know this? Because I look at what happened during COVID. The World Health Organization now is trying to come up with a pandemic plan, a disease X plan. Did Jamaica genetic and cultural and environmental identity help in COVID? And can it help in the future? Yes, and know. When we started, we panicked because we didn't have a plan. We looked at the rest of the world, and we had to wait for vaccine, we had to wait for testing material, we had to wait for, advice from the expert at CDC. But the expert is telling you that even if there is a genetic risk and you control that genetic risk, you're better off than person without a genetic risk that don't control the genetic risk. The World Health Organization was stunned during COVID. The better resource countries like the UK, Italy, Germany, many of them died from COVID. When the World Health Organization looked at Africa, 65% of Africans were infected. They had one of the highest infection rates in the world. Only 4% of Africans took the vaccine, and Africa had one of the lowest death rates in the world. What does this mean? It means that they had expected Ebola and Ebola and COVID to kill off the African. But they understand that they didn't have advanced health system, but with what they had, they managed it properly. Can we do that? I say yes. In 2021, our young athlete went to Kenya. I did not agree. They went to the Under-20 World Championship. They set an Under-20 record. Most of them were infected with COVID. Yet still, they set a record. When the Kenyan did the PCR and the antigen test, they were positive, but Kenya wanted us to look at the profile of the Jamaicans. When we looked at the profile, their platelet count was normal, their mean platelet volume was low, meaning that the platelets small up themselves, much like our ancestors small up themselves during slavery. The neutrophil count was low, meaning that there was an immune reaction. The lymphocyte counts were high, meaning there was inflammation. This is a classic COVID response. These persons were supposed to be symptomatic. They were asymptomatic. They set an Under-20 record. Why? Because the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade is woven in our DNA, influencing both our health and athletic performance. AI and genetics are key to unraveling these complex connections. Genetics, we saw that the profile of the Jamaican looked like the Kenyan. That means we breed like we are in the Rift Valley. We breed like we are in high altitude. So it means that if we use what we have, we can offer hope for a better health outcome and a deeper understanding of our legacy. Let us continue to explore the fascinating interplay of history, genetics, and technology. I leave you with this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Irving. I must say, I don't always sit through and listen to every word I hear, but I did this afternoon. And you know, for me, the one thing that came away for me, well, among others, is that we are destined for greatness with an inherent capacity for survival. That for me was the enduring message of everything I heard. But what we would have observed this afternoon as Professor Irving spoke is the breadth and depth of work that has gone into the result of what we have, who is a professor who is able to give an inaugural lecture, which was as comprehensive as it was, notwithstanding the limited time period within which she spoke. And it also was an indication that certainly for me, and perhaps for many of us as well, there's so much more we need to learn. There's so much more we need to know about ourselves and how it is that our historical beginnings and the continuing relationship we have with our past has impacted who we are to become, and by extension, who those others flowing from us, our children, our grandchildren, and so on, will be in the future as they too become a part of that chain of development that we've all benefited from, and the chain of historical linkages that has made us more looking like and sounding like Kenyans probably, even though we are historically from West Africa. And that for me is an indication of just how wonderful the human beings are, and how well it is that we are capable of making relevant adaptations to meet the circumstances that we're in. Having said so, let me again thank Professor Irving for having taken us on this journey today and for having excited us to wanting to learn more, and for having given us the opportunity to understand a little better the work that she has been involved in and how impactful it must be for all of us. I want to say a special thanks, of course, to everyone who has supported this venture. And these things never happen by chance. I'm looking at Alexander Shaw, who is belatedly here to represent the minister. And he tells me that he doesn't have any words to say at this time, but he has allowed me to say them for him. But he's here to represent. I'm also looking at the leader of the opposition who made sure he was here, and he's sitting there looking at me. And so we have wonderful representation. And the one thing I'm sure of, as I'm seeing my good friend Andre Earl at the back as well, somewhere in the middle there, is that we're all here because we're special to Professor Irving. We're not here in the great number and the great mass that otherwise, but it tells us that we were special enough to get invited. And we're special enough to be here as representatives of the wonderful human being she is and the body of work that she has created that we've all benefited from. So again, as I continue, by way of a vote of thanks, and do forgive me for not having everything on hand. I'm doing a bit of this, much of it, quite frankly, ad-libbing, not because I was given a special list, but let us see where we go with it. So we want to thank everyone for having put this program together. I know there's a lot of hard work that goes in back end. We don't see it at all. But in particular, the Faculty of Medical Sciences, and in particular, the Department of Basic Medical Sciences, for the work that has been done to have this event on. I look at you, Prof. Brown, and I know that you could tell me a long list of persons who have been involved, as could Prof. Irving. But I would just say, we ask you to thank them all on our behalf, and on behalf certainly of Professor Irving, for the hard work that they did. We want to thank as well the Reverend Dr. Burchell Taylor and this event started with a prayer, and I can't remember every word, but I know I was greatly blessed by it, as we all would have been by what happened. So we're thankful for the prayers and for the great blessing that you genuinely brought to us. The one prayer I can remember was Steve Harrell saying it every time. Guide us, O Lord, through the changes and varieties of this world, and in all that we do, let there be tranquility of spirit. I remember that because every time he took chapel, he said that as the prayer that he read from the Anglican prayer book. And so we all remembered it well. But having said that, we thank you, of course, Dr. Taylor, for your kind words and for the blessings that you were able to bring to the proceedings. We thank you as well, Professor Thame, Dean of the Faculty, for having extended the welcome, not just on behalf of the faculty, but on behalf of the entire University of the West Indies for all of us who are here. We thank you again, Professor Brown, for your kind words and giving as much of an introduction as could have been given without being the person to introduce Professor Irving. So we thank you for that. We thank you, Professor Wright Pascoe Williams, again for having taken us through a journey about Professor Irving that few of us even knew, who understood, but you would have been with her for long, and you understand her journey better than most of us did. So much so that she came up here with tears in her eyes. That's a wonderful thing to have happened. We want to thank as well Vincencio, yes, our saxophonist and the keyboardist Khalil Barnett. He left, but he was the accompanist for the day. And so we thank them for the musical, the musical value that they brought to us, which again was so complimentary. It complemented the prayer very well. I can tell you that much from my perspective. And we want to thank the persons from overseas who gave their greetings via Zoom. And they were recorded and we had those played. Professor Aguilar Salinas, Professor Onwera out of Kenya, and we also had Tony Cunningham as well, who gave their greetings in that way. And back to where we started, we want to thank you again, Mr. Shaw, Alexander Shaw, for ably representing the minister in the manner in which you did. And I'm not saying that except to say showing up is a good thing. So we have had the pleasure of your attendance. And no, he's a lawyer who works in court, so we can forgive him. He may well have had a matter that took him away a little longer than he expected. So I'm speaking on his behalf. And in addition to that, now we want to also say, and Professor Irving is coming, that as you're here, so we have some cocktails which are available on the outside. And that has been kindly sponsored by the Scotiabank and by Victoria Mutual Buildings. Well, Victoria Mutual Bank. That is what it is these days. So we want to thank them for the kind. And please use the opportunity to get to know everybody. We don't all know each other. By now you know my name, or you don't know everybody else. So make sure that you learn everybody else's name, if nothing else, or one new name. But again, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and ensure that we carry the journey along. We hear there's a lot of unfinished work, and I'm happy to see both political parties, critical political parties, being represented. We hear of some significant areas for investment, So we want to take them with us. Yeah. So, no. He's not himself the politician, but he's representing one. So he will take the message back properly. So we want to ensure that we do the things. And the University of the West Indies, if I were to give my own personal plea, we're always happy to see the investments coming in and to see the critical support that we require to produce more Professor Irvings and to ensure that we have people continuing to carry the flag of Jamaica proud. Thanks again for the evening and have a wonderful rest of it.